Hello and welcome from my little writing space here in Vienna. My name is Luise, I'm a literature student and writer, and I want to invite you on a little research field trip to a little town in Austria, which is called Dürnberg, where you can find one of the oldest salt mines that opened their doors for visitors around 400 years ago. So I had an idea for a novel quite long ago. It started out as a short story, and then I got a lot of feedback that it actually sounded like some bigger project. I don't remember exactly when I wrote this, but it's probably at least 8 years ago. And then two different characters and the idea of writing about the salt mines in my hometown came up, but I hadn't really put it together with that short story that I had written long ago. And then I finally realized I think these characters, it's one female and two males, that they actually belong together in this specific setting. And ever since, I've been trying to make this story work, which is quite difficult because it's based on a lot of research and historical aspects, and I don't want to, make up some things because the research is out there and this place actually exists. It is set around 1848. This is a very interesting time, but also a difficult time, because on the one hand you had a very revolutionary atmosphere, especially in Vienna, but in these areas of Salzburg you probably might not have realized it that much. The people probably heard about it, but it wasn't like there was also a revolution going on in these rural parts, where I still have to figure out how much my characters actually know about this and how much they are able to, interact with this kind of revolutionary situation. Also, I do have some artistic freedom, of course, but I don't want to write complete nonsense. And in addition to this atmosphere in the area of Salzburg where I'm setting the novel, you had, especially during this time, a very poor population, famines and extreme winters. So the people were malnourished, and this is the situation that I'm trying to capture and where my characters are living their day-to-day life and interacting with each other. And this year I've really tried to make the most of my novel project and really dive deep into it. I have met with 2 historians and did a lot of research myself. I have so much material reading through all of that stuff. I also vlogged throughout this whole experience, so you can watch some of my older videos where I talk about, talking to the historians and going to museums and checking out the library for more books and information. So yeah, I came to the point where I realized I should actually visit the salt mines. So the salt mines are open for tourists. You can have a guided tour in there. It's absolutely safe. And it's actually one of the first salt mines that was open for the public. And on their website, it says that in 1607, the first person who was not a worker visited the salt mines. This is actually very special. And now you just walk in there and it's very touristy. I remember when I was a kid, it was a little bit less commercial. So I'm going to take you along on this little visit and give you some of the information that I got because I think it's actually really interesting. I am ready for the mines, on my way to the bus station. I'm very excited. I haven't been in the mines since I was a kid, and I think they changed some of the things, so really looking forward to it. You get this amazing outfit to go into the mines. It's pretty cold in there, therefore it's a good idea to wear lots of layers. Here you can see a little chapel that is before all the tunnels stretch out and the mine workers would go to their place of work. Religion was a very important part of people's lives back then. So as far as excavations and research goes, 2,600 years ago, the Celts settled on the Dürnberg, which is this mountain where the salt mines go in, and they first started salt mining in this area. Thinking of how they did that is so incredible. They had very easy tools. They used picks to knock out the stone and to find the salt. So that's one way to do it. And the other way is to extract the salt from the brine. Brine is water with a very high salt content. And these kind of methods were actually used for the majority of time until explosives were developed, which is after the period that I'm covering in my novel. This is editing me for clarification. These methods are still used, but the tools have changed drastically. You still extract the salt from either brine springs or via adding water into the mines to dissolve the salt and to create brine, which is then pumped into the saline to extract the salt via evaporation. These are the wet methods in comparison to the dry ones, where you knocked the salt out of the mountain with tools. Obviously, the handcraft was physically a lot more intense before heavy machines and dynamite came into use. So I have to learn about these primal tools and methods to extract the salt from the mountain, and this is very difficult actually to really get a feeling for how it was done and to also be able to describe it afterwards. And another factor that makes this period a little bit difficult is that in the research material that I have, this exact time, like around 1850, is very often not covered because it was a bit of a low time before things started to, get better again. So it's very often just left out. And then a lot of changes happened. And like I said, the methods changed. And then also in the city of Hallein, which is below the mountain, you would have the pans where they extracted the salt from the brine, and they had so many all over the town, but it got less and less. So the salt production came in waves, so sometimes it was more and sometimes it was less. Around the time of 1850, I think at that point only 2 salients were active, because afterwards they built one huge one, and that's the one that you can still go to nowadays. The building is still there. They have events in there. And fun fact, one of my school balls was in there as well. There's a lot of salt in this building still. So yeah, I'm not gonna dive deep into that, but it's a very beautiful building. So the active salt mining ended in 1989, but there are actually still salt mines that are active in Austria, just not in Hallein anymore. And I also, I think I didn't mention that, so I met with a historian, but also with the gauger who still worked in the mines. Pretty crazy. So it's not that long ago that it shut down. To give you some numbers, the total length of the gallery system is 85.24 kilometers long. The deepest point that we reached during the tour was 210 meters. There are 21 different levels in total. When you drive under the earth, it's just a special feeling knowing that the whole mountain kind of embraces you. It's very special, and this is also the essence that I want to bring into the novel, or I'm gonna try at least. I didn't say there is only one character who is actually a miner and he's working in the mines. The other male character is working in one of the salines, and the third character, she is not working in the salt mine business. But working women, this is an interesting factor as well. So the period that I'm describing, women did not work in the mines, but they did have jobs in the town that revolved around the salt, like in the salines. They, for example, they had to heat the brine and then extracted the salt. Then there was obviously a lot of ashes, and there were the so-called Aschezieherinnen. The women got rid of the ashes and cleaned it out. Another fact is that the mine workers were actually a little bit secluded, so they did not interact that much with the workers in town, with, for example, the saline workers, or also the boatmen, the skippers. I'm not sure if that's the right term in this context, but you obviously had to bring the salt and all the wood they needed for the salines from A to B. They did that over the waterway on the Salzach, and a bit shocking, the skippers, they weren't allowed to be able to swim because then they were much more likely to try to save the boat and themselves, and especially the salt on the boat, which was so valuable, and not just swim to the shore and let it sink. And back to the mine workers, they were rather secluded. They usually worked as farmers next to their mining jobs. There is this thing of safe poverty, especially for mine workers. They kind of inherited the right to be a mine worker from their fathers, and there were also these systems for the mine workers and for anyone who wasn't a day worker, like they got paid every day, but was a fixed worker. They also had some sort of insurance, but still they were extremely poor. Labor was extremely hard, and yeah, this is the so-called safe poverty in this sense. These are some of the historical aspects that I found out over the course of my research, and it was beautiful to be inside of the mountain. So you drive inside on these little wagons, and you can also slide down on the slopes that the actual mine workers used. There is one slope that they had to shut down because there were several incidents where people got hurt because it was so steep and the line afterwards to slow down wasn't long enough. Yeah, so we didn't use that one. That is really fun. There was a very embarrassing incident because the tour guide said we are only allowed to go down together, and I was on my own, and I was just kind of freaking out, me with my social anxiety, standing there being like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? And I was too afraid to just ask the tour guide what to do. So there was this Swiss couple standing next to me, and I heard them talk, so I realized, okay, they understand German. There were lots of tourists from all around the world. And I went to them and were like, can I slide with you? And they were a little bit weird. And I said, yeah, I'm not allowed to slide on my own. And the thing is, on that slide, they took a photo of us. I knew that, but now I'm on their photo. And then on the second slide, I was like, okay, I can't do this again because they probably don't want me to slide with them because they were really awkward with me. So I finally asked the tour guide, and he was like, yeah, you could slide with me. And then I just slid with him. It was fine. I freaked out for nothing. So I'm on that photo of this couple. I'm sorry. And then you also cross the German border because half of the mines are actually in Germany, and there is a special contract that the miners had that they were allowed to work in the German territory. Very interesting. There is also a lake that you ferry over with a boat, and that's very special. And they had this kind of music and this shadow play going on. Could taste the brine, which was obviously very salty. And then the tour goes back in time to the Middle Ages, and also how the Celts were able to get the salt out of the mountain. Colors you see in the stone, that's actually the salt. In the footage you can also see a few tunnels that are very, very narrow. And this doesn't mean that the tunnels were this small back in the days, but they actually shrink because of the impact of the mountain and the rock around. So they just get smaller and smaller. So this is why you see a lot of very, very small tunnels, but it's not that they had to crawl through them or anything. At the end, we took the escalator, but you can also see what the mine workers had to deal with because they had to take the stairs if they wanted to get to a different level. Hello! Do I know everything about the mines now? Probably not. But it was very interesting and also helpful. But the only problem I have is that the time that I'm covering in my novel, which is around 1850, or precisely 1848, is not a time that is covered very often in any literature, and also now at the museum, because it was a time where the salt situation was a little bit like stagnating. I have to kind of, put all the information together and find the bits and bobs that are relevant for me. And now I'm walking down. I missed the bus, which is not a problem. I can walk down. It's not too far, I think an hour or something. And yeah, I hope this was interesting for you as well. And I'll try to put it all together and tell you a little bit about the salt mines here in my home area. On my way home, I came by a few different mine entrances, so this is what they looked like, but obviously it is closed, so you can't just wander around. This would be far too dangerous. This is also a little memorial for the mine worker Josef Aschauer, who died here in an accident on the 13th of April 1950. Can still see the old brine pipeline that would lead from the mountain down into the city Hallein in the valley, where they would extract the salt in the salines. It was actually a good decision to walk down, because I completely forgot that you come by all of the mine entrances, or in German you would say Mundloch, and this is one of them. It's obviously not open anymore. This one was called Wolf-Dietrich-Berg, and they opened it in 1596. It goes 1,600 meters into the mountain, and this is very relevant. Hi, by the way, you can see me. Okay, and here you can still see the old tracks from the little railway that would lead into the mountain. Coming to the end of this little tour, it was very informative and just also exciting and adventurous, so I loved going there. I hope that this doesn't sound like an advertisement, because this is not what I'm trying to do. It's just a part of history of my hometown that I've always been very interested in, and a part of my research journey. I hope this is interesting for you. I didn't take any notes in there that wouldn't have been possible, or like a little bit unpractical, but I did take some video footage and just try to take it all in. And then when I got home, I wrote down a few aspects that I wanted to remember. I'm very happy I did that and that I was able to bring you along. I hope you enjoyed this little research trip. Thank you for coming along on this adventure, and let me know in the comments the thoughts that you had, and also if you would go inside a salt mine. I mean, for people who are claustrophobic, it might be a little bit uncomfortable. Sometimes it was extremely dark and you had absolutely no idea where you were walking. I mean, it was all safe, but still can be a little scary. Also for the children, there were a few who were like a little bit irritated at the beginning, but then it got better. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, and I hope I can continue this writing journey. Who knows if I'll ever finish this novel or if it's ever going to be published, but at least up until this point it was very enjoyable and I love sharing it with you. So yeah, thank you for being here. I think I already said that. And it is time to finish my tea, and I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye. There were also the shipman people, schiffer. So many terms, I don't know. Okay, where's my tea? Boopity beepity boopity boop beep beep. In these rural, this is such a hard word.